Hello everyone, this is Practical Knowledge for the Awakening. I'm your host, Justin Deschamps from Stillness in the Storm blog.
And Julian Robles.
And Julian's here with me. This is going to be the YouTube video recording for a show we did. We got about halfway through on January 18th, 2015, which that is the normal time for our show in this series. This is the fourth part in a series that we're going to be doing about a great many things. And this particular episode is going to deal with free will, the contractual reality, and honor. So we're going to learn essentially how to discern between different modes of manifesting our desires. How do we manifest our desires? Are we doing it honorably, dishonorably? And what does that actually mean? And how does that help us in trying to live more harmoniously with the earth, each other, and ourselves? So just some brief information and announcements. Our blog is at the bottom left. You can find it at sits, S-I-T-S, show.blogspot.com. There at the top you'll see the radio show archives, where you can have all of the previous shows for this Practical Knowledge for the Awakening series that we're doing on Galactic U Radio with Sierra Neblina. You can also find a link to the Blogtalk radio page where our shows are normally hosted. And those shows normally happen on Sunday, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So, as a normal preamble to our shows here, I'm going to just go through this first slide. And even though we share information with an air of conclusiveness, we are not authorities or gurus on truth. But we have knowledge that we have acquired that we feel has veracity. We feel it reflects the truth and it has truth in it. And we want to discuss these ideas with you. We're more interested in having a dialogue, really. Although, obviously, in this video presentation, it's going to be more of a monologue. But I definitely want to encourage participation. And as far as me and my process, I think discussing these concepts and ideas in an open format, either via email or if you're calling into the show, or you just want to have a quick discussion via chat or something like that, it's always a really good idea for not only myself to understand the knowledge that I'm putting forth, or more importantly to discern if this potential knowledge I'm offering is accurate. It helps to get other people's perspectives. So we offer the things that we're presenting here as a premise, a coded zip file, or potential knowledge. You know, in our world today, we have most of the information that is presented to us is presented kind of prepackaged and ready to go. And all you have to do is just believe it and accept it, and you're ready to start running. But really what we want to emphasize is that in order for knowledge to really have an impact in our lives, we've got to take the time to unzip it. We have to take the time to decode it and decipher it and see how that integrates with all the other knowledge that we've gained. So that's why we say it's potential knowledge. Together we determine an idea's veracity, its truthfulness. So veracity is just a term that refers to how true something is. And one thing we covered in great detail in the first two episodes of this series was exactly what is truth, what is falseness, what is truth for us, and how does that actually help us. So I'm going to briefly go over that again in this episode. And then lastly, truth-seeking is the creative action for all awakening. And basically what we're getting at is that the process of searching for knowledge, of searching for information, and searching for understanding is what opens us up. It's an intention that changes our consciousness and allows new data and perspectives to stream in so that we can feel transformed, basically, and actually go through that process of transformation consciously versus unconsciously, which is more of a feeling of victimization. So moving on to the next slide here. This is an appendix slide I added to this presentation from the natural law episode that we did last week. And as we go through these presentations, we're going to be discussing a lot of the concepts with a backdrop of natural law. And this is to help facilitate the understanding of how these principles work in relation to some very concrete and accurate descriptions of reality that have been passed down throughout the ages. Now, briefly before I go through this, I want to just mention something that we talked about in the first two episodes about what truth actually is for us in this as human beings. And truth for us is a mental creation. And this brings us to our first point in the 7 principles, mentalism. And what I mean by that is the truth, or a premise, or an idea, becomes true when it is compared to something or some context that it applies to. So if I say that the sky is blue right now, okay, that's just an idea or a thought form. Within my mind, I can think of the sky being blue, and it is true within the context of my mind. But if I compare that to the actual the sky that we're living under right now, if you go out and you actually look to see if the sky is clear for yourself, well, maybe that may not be accurate for what you're experiencing. So the point I'm getting at here is that really truths for us, accessing knowledge that is reflective of the truth, is something that has a context, and it's a mental reflection. It's reflective in the mental area, and that's what mentalism is referring to. These 7 principles that natural law describes are aspects of the creation or the illusory reality that we're living in. We're going to get more into that later. But without getting into too many abstract concepts, basically these 7 principles describe our reality, the reality we're living in right now. And even though we can talk about these 7 principles individually, it's really difficult to completely separate one principle from any of the other. As a matter of fact, I would argue it's easier to understand the 7 principles when we put them in relation to themselves and using an example. So using the first, or talking about the first one, I already kind of mentioned the universe is mental, and what that means is that the objective reality that we're in right now, the reality of objects and things and ideas, which are also objects, okay, they have their own unique form and expression. There's the objective reality, and then there's the subjective experience of the objective reality. And a really good example of this is a photograph. So if you can imagine, you're taking a picture of some scene. Maybe there's a tree and some grass, and maybe there's a couple people in the scene. Well, each of those items in the scene is in and of itself an object, okay? Now, if you want to take a photo, what you do is you capture all of the objects in the scene and render them into a single image, okay? And basically our experience in reality is just exactly the same way. Every moment that we're living, we're immersed in a scene of objects. So if you can imagine, you're probably sitting here listening to me through a computer right now. Well, the computer is an object in reality. If you walk away from the computer and it's not in your field of awareness, it doesn't cease to exist. It may cease to have an impact on your subjective experience, okay? But the object exists in and of itself. And what the mentalism concept is referring to is that when things come into our awareness, we give them meaning based off their experience, based off our experience. Okay, so our experience subjectively, and this relates to our emotions, how we decide what things mean. What does this computer mean for us? You know, you may be listening to my voice on the computer. You may watch TV shows on the computer, you may do reading on the computer, you may do various things on the computer. So depending on what you do with the object, how you use it, how you define it, creates your subjective experience. And that's kind of what the mentalism concept is referring to. But within that description, we're also talking about correspondence, because correspondence is has many meanings, but generally speaking it means the relationship of two things, two or more things, to each other, and what is actually being described by that relationship. Correspondence also is fractality, or as above, so below. The idea that that things relate to each other in a way that the meanings that can be derived between two objects in your experience, for example, you know, if I hand you a candle, okay, and then I hand you a box of matches, well, these two items are going to have a relationship with each other, aren't they? The corresponding relationship is going to create potentials of action. You could light the match and then put it to the tip of the candle wick and ignite the candle. So what we're kind of referring to here is that when you place two objects together in your experience and in your awareness, a natural charge or potential for desire, intention, and action is presented. And in a really big, grand sense, correspondence is referring to the as above, so below type of concept, that if you think about the universe, okay, at the very, very big, for example, there's popular images out there, they've gone around Facebook and whatnot, where they show super galaxy or galaxy clusters, and then they show nerve cells, and the geometric formation, the pattern that they make, is very similar with each other. They're actually in a what's called a fractal relationship, or self-similar relationship, where the actual geometry of the galaxy clusters matches proportionally to nerve cells. So at almost every phase of reality, depending on what degree you're looking at, you're going to have this corresponding relationship. And this idea of correspondence is going to be incredibly important when we discuss our relationship to other beings and our relationship to the creator of natural law and the creator in general. Vibration. Vibration refers to, everybody's heard this before, sound is a really good example of vibration. So if you have a low sound, oh, that is a very low vibration. If you have a high sound, ah, now you have a higher vibration. Okay, and what that is referring to is that the amount of peaks and cycles within any given period of time or space is either higher or lower. And everything in reality has this aspect of vibration. Okay, our reality is essentially, you could say it's a sonic reality, or it mimics the properties of sound. So you have waveforms, you have frequencies, you have the abilities of waves to cancel each other out, to add on top of each other, okay, to have coherence, so you have wave systems becoming very organized. You could have dissonance, where they're becoming disorganized, and all this refers to vibration. Number 4, polarity. Polarity is referring to, essentially, to give a really good example from a personal perspective, excuse me, polarity is referring to your point of view in relation to a certain spectrum of manifestation. So to give an example of that, we can talk about heat, or the experience of hot and cold. So for example, if you're in a hot, humid environment like the tropics, and it's 90 degrees Fahrenheit or 25 degrees Celsius, and you're feeling really warm, well, for you it feels like it's a hot environment, okay? And then let's say you walk into an air-conditioned environment, now it's more like 70 degrees or 20 degrees Celsius, and it starts to feel cool. So depending on your point of view, depending on the context, you're going to have different poles, different ends of the spectrum. The room that has air conditioning is going to feel cooler versus the hot place you just came from, okay? And really the essence of polarity, and this has been greatly misunderstood, I think, is that even though the universe expresses itself in terms of poles, so you always seem to have one end of a spectrum and another end of the spectrum. For example, with light you have radio waves and microwaves. Those are the very low vibration, low frequency waves, and then at the top end you have X-rays and gamma rays. That's a high frequency vibration. But what it's really describing is total unity. Polarity is simply a difference of degree, or a difference of energy state. So just like we were talking about before with heat, or hot and cold, the experience of something being cold is only a matter of degree of separation between something that is hot. And in reality, we're talking about one unified thing. Okay? So polarity, what polarity is basically saying is that even though you have the experience of having opposites, in truth they're actually unified in a unified way, unified by degrees, and the experience of opposites is a matter of degree. Number 5, we have rhythm. This also relates to vibration, so the amount of up and down. If you snap your fingers in a definitive way at a certain vibration, you have a certain beat that's created. Well, if you speed that up, you have a higher beat that's created, a higher rhythm. And essentially what this is saying is just like rhythm and vibration kind of go hand in hand with each other. You've got a situation where most things in the universe express themselves in rhythmic vibrations. So, for example, our consciousness, our state of awareness, our brain waves, and we're going to get into this specifically in this episode, they're constantly shifting to low and higher states. The polarity, exactly. So, you know, when you're asleep, your brainwave states, your awareness of your physical body is almost completely non-existent. As a matter of fact, there's a chemical that's released in your body that paralyzes you, so that when you're in your dreams, you don't accidentally start walking around and doing things. So the point is that your level of awareness, your vibration as far as awareness, when you're asleep is very low. Conversely, when you're doing fencing, for example, you're playing a sport or ping pong, your mental vibration is very high, and you're able to the state of your vibration and the rhythms that come with that are going to dictate how much freedom of choice or free will activation is happening at any given moment. Number 6, causality. Causality is a big one. In the physical sciences, you can think about this concept as every motion has an equal and opposite, or every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So essentially what we're talking about is that the things that we observe, the events that we're observing right now, have their causes, and if you trace back the causes far back enough, you're going to eventually get to this one cause, the cause of causes. And this idea of causality is going to be very important for our discussion today. Additionally, with causality, we have the idea of karma. So for us, when we have a desire, because we've been aware of something in our reality, you know, maybe we feel thirsty because we feel these sensations of, you know, our mouth feeling dry and our throat feeling parched. Well, if we see that there's a glass of water in front of us, it's going to be in our awareness, it's going to be in the mental realm, the mentalism, the corresponding relationship between our body that feels parched and this glass of water is going to potentialize an action. We're going to have the desire to drink it, okay? And now we're going to generate possible methods of actualizing that desire. We're going to have a potential way of making this feeling of being thirsty. We're going to quench our thirst by drinking the water. And now we're going to start to act. We're going to make causes to generate the effects. This also leads into generation. So what we have is a situation where our desires are going to allow us, once we have a desire, we're going to need to act on it. And I'm going to get into what that represents in a moment. But if we misunderstand the relationships, if we do not accurately perceive and have positive knowledge of the relationship between ourselves and the glass, maybe we overextend ourselves and we accidentally knock the glass over. Okay, and we have an effect based on the cause. And what we're really getting at, what I'm getting at with this, is that we have the idea of karma, that the things that actually happen in comparison to what we want to happen is going to directly reveal how much knowledge we actually had. So if we have mistakes, if we have missteps, if we have problems that come up, these are really the pearls of wisdom that we can use to analyze and determine, well, what did I miss? What steps did I miss so I can create the actual experience I want? And then finally we have the principle of gender. Now when we talk about the principle of gender, we're not only speaking about sexual gender of male and female, although that is a manifestation of it. What we're really talking about is how things are created, how they are generated. And this principle specifically can be broken into a masculine and a feminine aspect. Now again, I'm not talking about sexual organs or machismo versus feminine passivity or anything like that. What I'm really speaking about is the active principle and the passive principle. And within the mind, this is going to be very important for us in understanding this presentation, but really in general, anything. So within our mind, the active principle or the masculine principle is our consciousness. This is where the free will, okay, our will, has the greatest degree of influence. And then the feminine aspect is the unconscious or passive aspect. Now, I'm not saying one is superior to the other, okay? It's not about women are passive and they just need to not activate themselves or take an active role. That's not what I'm saying at all. This is just purely a concept within the mind, and more importantly, we can understand how our mind works and how we generate things in reality. So if I start to say words that have symbol association, like basketball or eggs or palm tree, well, these words, because you're paying attention, your active principle, your masculine aspect, is consciously paying attention to what I'm saying. Images and associations from your own experience that have been settled into the unconscious mind are going to start to bubble up to the surface. And what we have is an example of generation. Because you were paying attention to the words that I was saying, and you recognized the term palm tree, an image of a palm tree popped up in your mind. You're literally able to see an image, and that process is a process of mental image creation or generation, with you paying attention, the masculine, and the feminine aspect coming up, and it's an actual generation of images. So that's the principle of gender right there. Okay, so now we're going to use these ideas that we've been talking about to describe where free will comes from, how it actually works in our reality, and how my will harmonizes with not only other people's wills, but the Creator's will. And really, we're going to try to address some of these big ideas that have been floating around in the New Age Awakening movement. This idea of total unity with the Creator, this idea of sovereignty and having personal freedom of and rights and sovereign rights. And we're also going to get into the idea of honor and how our wills are harmonized, or they come into unification through the process of agreement and contracts. So, who created natural law? Well, let's go through a logical deduction. If the natural laws are the rules of life, the physical, mental, and spiritual laws operating from the beginning, and intelligence must have put these rules in place and set events into motion. There must have been a first cause, and therefore a primal reality to the one that we know, something that came before. So again, we're using our logical process here. Very simple. We're using the law of, or the principle of causality. So we know that every effect has its cause. So if we just try to trace back where does everything come from? And the physical sciences have been doing this for a long time now. This is where the idea of a Big Bang comes from. When they take all of the information that they've accumulated and they try to trace back everything to the beginning, to the primal, the core aspects of everything, all of our reality, they premise that there was this infinite moment, or this moment in the past, where all the material that we are seeing and all the stars and the galaxies and planets, everything emanated from this Big Bang moment. Okay, so even in physical science, where the idea of a first cause is harmonized, okay? Well, in many spiritual works and religious works as well, we also have this idea of a first cause, that the Creator put the rules in place and set events into motion. So it's fairly logical to assume that some intelligence or some type of force put these rules into place and set events into motion. And considering if anybody's ever heard of chaos theory was developed in the mid-20th century as a way to try to prove that our reality is very random and chaotic. And what they tried to do is they tried to look at things that seemed chaotic and see, prove that there was a randomness, a chaos factor associated. But what they actually ended up doing was the reverse. Everywhere they looked to try to prove that the universe was inherently chaotic, it was the reverse. They saw organization at almost every level. Deep, very deep organization. So even modern science, if we just look at a very rational, logical, left brain perspective, even within modern physical science, there is a preponderance of data to suggest that the universe is intelligently organized. So now let's put forth the premise that there is in fact a creator. And I'm going to try to steer away from words like God, because they have a whole bunch of other connotations that get lumped in with them. But let's just suppose, for example, that there's this creator, okay? And the creator put these rules into place. So what qualities or properties would this creator have? And we went in depth into the properties of truth in episode 2 of this series, so I strongly suggest you look into that just in general, but that'll definitely help with this particular aspect of the presentation here. So the creator, like the truth, is singular, eternal, absolute, and personal, can be known by other persons, and is indivisible in prime true reality. So what we're getting at is that within the moment before the Big Bang, just to kind of put it into context, even though in my personal research and understanding, I'm not so sure how valid that concept is, but just to give it into a storyline, a narrative here, in the moments before the Big Bang, what we have is total unity. We have unification of personality, so there's only one personality. We have a total unification of any and all things, and we have this idea that things are singular or absolute, so we're beyond time and space at this point. And then right after the Big Bang, or right when we start to have the creation, okay, we've got kind of two different realities that we're talking about here. We have the primal reality where everything is totally unified and we are at one completely with the Creator, okay, and everything, there is no time, there is no space, there's this primordial essence or primordial nature to reality, a singularity, okay? And then we have this other thing called the creation or the universe that we're actually in right now. This has been termed the illusion in many spiritual and popular religious works. So using the natural law principles and our logical deduction, what is the Creator's relationship to this creation, our world? Well, when we look out in the world, we see that the Creator is infinite, divided into many parts, many divisions, and is omnipresent, so it's everywhere. It is realizing the whole and all parts respectively. So what that means is, just like we were talking about earlier about correspondence and the galaxy clusters and nerve cells, everywhere we look in reality there seems to be this aspect of fractality or correspondence. So the way that waves move on a lake is the same way that waves move in the solar system, and it's the same way that waves move in the galaxy, and it's also the same way that our heart, when it pumps, it radiates that energy out into our body. So we have this idea of correspondence everywhere. And within the time-space illusion, the parts are becoming more perfect or creator-like in personality attainment over time, as truth is reflected within. So kind of what we're supposing here, or we're premising, is that the infinitely or the singularly and absolutely perfect state of being before the Big Bang, that's kind of like the source of everything, and that is emerging or unfolding into the creation as time goes on. So as to make an even better example of this, as a human being, right? When you're born, your personality is there in potential. All of your potentials are kind of there ready to be accessed, but they need to be actualized, or they need to be synthesized from your experience. So as you begin to live your life and you gain familiarity with your body and you learn what it is, you learn that you have these hands and feet and you can breathe and there's food, and you know that this person that is always around is your mother, and that this other guy, he's your father. So you start to make associations and meanings, and through your experience you start to actualize the potentials of your personality, okay? And eventually you start to develop the ability to speak, you start to develop the ability to recognize other people, you can recognize yourself, okay? And you start to really reflect more of reality within your mind, and as a result of that, all of the potentials of your personality start to become more and more perfected over time. And eventually, depending on how well or how much you choose to identify with the truth, which we're going to be getting into here momentarily, you're going to be becoming more perfect, or becoming more like the universe or like the Creator over time. So essentially what we have here is the corresponding relationship between ourselves and the Creator, and the idea that there is an actual Creator. Some intelligent force put these rules into place and actually started the ball rolling, started putting events into motion. And we, as aspects of that creation and that part, we are reflections of the whole in part, okay? That's the other thing about the creation, or the reality that we're in, which has been termed the illusion, is that you can take any object, and as you begin to analyze it and you look at it, you realize that it's a unique expression of the entire universe, but in this little segmented part. okay, and especially when we get when we talk about atoms and things like this. You know, the hydrogen atom, as a matter of fact, the geometry of the hydrogen atom has been reflected as the same geometry of the heart of the sun. So this idea of correspondence is really instrumental in helping us understand the relationship between natural law, the creator, the illusory reality or the creation that we're in, and how this all works in relation to us. So that leads us into the next slide. What is free will then? Well, free will is simply the ability to choose, and it requires the conscious mind at some level. The masculine aspect, like we were talking about earlier, when you have your attention and your awareness and your focus, okay, that's the masculine mind. So generated effects, generated meanings, decisions, ideas, okay, feelings, they're settled into the unconscious mind, the feminine. So what we're kind of talking about here is that our consciousness, our actual attention and focus, where we direct it, what we choose to focus on, and then how we choose to generate and create those meanings is settled into the unconscious. Learning a language is a great example of this. When you first are starting to learn the written form of a language, these words and symbols that you have to really focus on just the alphabet, just learning what this shape, the letter A, what that sound is, what the letter B, what that sound is, and it takes a tremendous amount of focused energy and attention. Eventually, though, you start to get familiar with these things and they become automated and you start to remember them, and now, because you've studied the alphabet, you're able to start to form words and you can sound out different words. And then eventually you get so good at understanding words and symbols that you're able to just read books or read paragraphs or sentences, and it doesn't require a whole lot of conscious attention. You can almost do it automatically. So what we're getting at here is that everything we do in the conscious, everything that requires creative energy and work to learn or develop a skill for or to become better at, is going to require the conscious mind, but all of the fruit, all of the generated effects of our efforts are going to be settled into the feminine or the unconscious mind. So it is free will, so our will is free, we have freedom of choice because the creator is one. So essentially what we're talking about here is that because in the primal reality the creator has total, complete, and ultimate power over the reality itself, okay, in this primal aspect, because we are correspondent with that, we are fractal with that, we also have free will. Okay, so the creator's will and our will, in an ultimate grand sense, when we take the illusion, the reality we're in now, and we merge it with the primal reality, the creator's will and our will are always harmonized. Okay, but in the illusion of individuality is experienced as limited freedom of choice. Okay, so because our free will is within the illusion, is in the physical body, is actually a grand harmony of all these other things and objects and beings, well, my individuated will is only part of it. And as a result, because the creator's will can't be is absolute or can't be broken or abrogated, I can't have my will be total. And this is a big confusion I've noticed a lot in the New Age movement and the awakening community. A lot of times we talk about free will and people say, oh, well, if you really had free will, then you'd be able to think about something, and I could think about you disappearing and you would just cease to exist. Well, no, that's not the case, because what you're failing to realize in that erroneous premise is that that person has just as much free will as you do, and they have a limited sense of free will, and all of the wills together in the aggregate produce the created reality that we have. So within our awareness, within our understanding of ourselves, our will is limited. Another good example of this is if you're trying to row your boat. Let's imagine you're in a canoe and you're paddling across a lake, okay? Well, if you had total and absolute free will, you could just imagine yourself going from one end of the lake to the other, and you'd just be there. You wouldn't even have to paddle. But because the boat, the oar, the air, your body, the water, everything is an object or thing, an aspect of the Creator that also has its own free will, your will and these other objects that have will need to harmonize together. So this is experienced as limited freedom of choice, and it is encountered as offers, okay, in experience, relative free will. Essentially what we're talking about is that our ability to create or generate or co-create with the reality around us is dependent on how well we're able to harmonize our will with the will the will of other beings around us. Or to put it in a little easier way to understand, our ability to manifest our desires is dependent on how much knowledge and awareness we have accurately reflected within ourselves. So some examples of free will within the 7 principles. We have mentalism, awareness of choice. So basically, because the universe is mental, because everything is inherently neutral in the objective reality, as we come to understand it and develop meanings for it, we gain a greater awareness, and this awareness of reality, because we can recognize it, is going to make us aware of choices. Or more importantly, we can start to have desires and goals that we want to start to implement. Okay? Correspondence, again, this is very important. Harmony of wills via contract. Okay? A great example of this is an orchestra. If you want to play the piano and the piece that you're playing requires a cello and a violin and a viola and an oboe and various other instruments, well, everybody has to come together, have a meeting of the minds so that they can make sure they're on the same page. They agree to follow a certain tempo and start the piece at a certain time. They may even delegate the initiation or the flow of how they're going to perform the piece to a conductor so that they all can work together to harmonize their wills. All of this is an agreement. Another word for this is a contract. Con meaning together, tract meaning path. Okay? Vibration, just simply the less or more awareness of choice. So like we were talking about before, depending on your brainwave functions and your awareness of your physical body, you're going to have more freedom of choice to operate with your body, or less depending on how aware you are. Polarity, simple example, just right and wrong in relation to either your goals or natural law in a big grand sense. So for example, if you're trying to like I was mentioning earlier, you're thirsty and there's a glass of water sitting in front of you. Well, if your goal is to pick up the glass of water and drink it, and when you go to reach for it, you don't anticipate the distance and you accidentally push the glass off the table, well, now you're wrong in that sense. If your goal was to grab the glass and drink it successfully, the method that you used was wrong in relation to the goal. Okay? And these terms, right and wrong, I may just do a whole episode on this because these words in our society are used in such a general way that they end up conditioning people in type of a externalized mind control sense. But anyway, the point is that we do have a polarity. We do have this idea of right and wrong, and that does have a meaning as long as we apply it to a context properly. Rhythm. Attention shifting in and out. So just simply like I was mentioning earlier, when you're asleep, your attention is more shifted inward into the inner realms, your dream state, versus outward when you're maybe playing basketball or you're doing some more physical activity. Causality. Effective or ineffective towards one's goals. Karma. Again, a huge concept to understand. Causality is also referring to moral culpability, or the idea of who was at fault, depending on what effect would happened. And I know fault and blame and moral culpability have been kind of vilified in the New Age movement as being part of the old paradigm, but these words do have meaning, and they can be helpful for us, especially in relation to understanding ourselves and purifying our knowledge base, which we're going to get into here momentarily. And finally, we have gender. Choices made generate results, co-creation. So because of our awareness, because we recognize the properties of objects in our reality based off our knowledge, those are going to create the potential for choices. And when we make a choice, when we decide to do something, that is going to generate results in reality. And I'm going to get into this later, but basically any time we act in the world, it's a co-creative function. Whether or not that is harmonious or disharmonious remains to be seen, but everything that we do with our bodies, with our minds, with other people, with the environment, with objects, it's all co-creative at all phases. Moving on. Okay, so now we're going to really get into this idea of conscious awareness and awareness of choice. So just before I get too specifically in this, the theme of this particular episode is first going to start with this idea of awareness, that through our mind, through our ability to be aware of things and our sense data, and our ability to create corresponding meanings, we're going to be able to recognize objects based off our knowledge, either accurately or inaccurately. So depending on how correctly we recognize an object is going to dictate how aware we truly are. Okay, and the higher our states of awareness, the higher our mental vibration, the more freedom of choice we're going to have in any given moment, the more power of creation we have. Now specifically, we're going to talk about in relation to our physical body. So looking at the top of the graph, we have gamma, and looking at the bottom, we have delta. These are brainwave cycles and our states of consciousness. Literally what they do is they take electrodes and they hook them up to people's heads, and they measure the electrical functioning of the brain, and they're able to get a graph. So at the top we see gamma, and as you notice, the peaks and the troughs, okay, the rhythm of the vibration here, there's a lot of peaks and troughs in the top graph, isn't there? If you look down at the below, the other end of the polarity and the spectrum, we have the delta, where there's much less peaks and troughs. So what we're talking about is that the frequency or the vibration is higher in gamma and lower in delta. And as we get into the descriptions of this, it's going to become apparent that the higher our mental vibration, the more aware we are of our reality in general, and as such, the greater the potential to act and have desires and have intentions and to do things, to create, to use our free will. So in gamma states we have superconsciousness, highly attentive states of consciousness and perception. In beta we have the fairly awake or fully awake, just ordinary consciousness. I'm going to get into all these in more detail in the next slide. In the alpha state, we're kind of subconscious, we're deeply relaxed in a light state of hypnosis or meditation. In the theta state, we're superconscious or drowsy, tranquil, unconscious, light sleep. And then in the dream state, we're deeply unconscious asleep. Now what's interesting to note here is that from a grand totality sense, so when we incorporate not just the physical body, but the mental body, the emotional body, the etheric or astral body, if you want to use those terms, our consciousness is shifting in and out. When we're at a high state of gamma, more of our conscious energy, our spirit totality, is the attention, okay, is focused in the body, okay? Yet as we go down, we almost kind of take our consciousness energy and we begin to move out of the physical body, but it doesn't cease to be active. when we're deeply asleep, our consciousness is very active. As a matter of fact, people have reported, and I know I have experienced this, where I feel like I'm having dreams, and these dreams feel like years are going by. But then I wake up and it's only been 4 or 5 hours. So the point I'm getting at here is that in our consciousness in totality, including not only the physical but also the spiritual, the mental, again the astral, etheric, whatever, however you want to break these realities down, there's always a deep level of activity. Okay? So moving down, awareness and choice. So again, dependent on how well we're actually able to reflect reality within ourselves, how accurately we represent reality within, which is a way of describing how much positive knowledge meaning an accurate representation of reality, negative knowledge meaning an inaccurate representation of reality. And again, I strongly suggest you review the first and second, or well, the second episode, because the first one is contained in the second, of our presentation, because we get into that idea in great detail. So depending on how much awareness we have and our consciousness state, we're going to have more ability to create, more ability for our free will to operate and generate effects. Where the higher our mental state, the greater the awareness of potential choices, actions, and creations. So within the gamma states, the highest level of consciousness, we're in a state of inspiration. So that's more of the mental, internal state. We feel really inspired. You could feel like a bliss state where you're profoundly aware of things in your reality, and you're consciously choosing to accept and love them and find appreciation and value in them. So it's your will is really operating very quickly. Your focus and attention is expanding in and out, expanding in and out, expanding in and out, and you're getting this really high energy emotional state as a result, the inspiration state. In a more physical sense, time slowing down, acute focus. So here we have, like if you're doing a sport, for example, like playing ping pong or fencing, or maybe even you're playing a video game that requires a high degree of button smashing, as they call it, then your focus and attention is going to be such that you're able to make quick choices. You know, when you're fencing, for example, I was watching a Star Trek episode. I think it was Iborg from the 5th season, and Captain Picard and Guinan are fencing with each other, and you know, they're parrying and stabbing and doing these movements with the sword very, very quickly. So what I'm getting at here is, in this situation, our attention and our focus is very grounded into the physical. It's acute, and we're aware of our physical body, we're aware of the opponent. If ping pong, for example, we're aware of our body because we're moving it around and we're anticipating where the ball's going. We're looking at the ball and seeing where that is going, and we're looking at the other person. But we may not be aware of what it's like outside, or what the sound of the room is ambiently, or maybe other things in the room. So our focus and attention is very acute. In terms of mental, we have higher learning. So when we talk about higher learning, we talk about, you know, it's also kind of inspiration. You may, or I would even say it could be revelation, or you're really unifying ideas. So for me, I know I experienced this when I'm reading some information, and the information that I'm reading, kind of all these thoughts start to bubble up that it relate to, and I start to make all these connections, and there's a real type of a weaving of what I'm experiencing consciously and what I've learned unconsciously, and there's a high degree of mental creation. That's what I would say is higher learning. In the beta state, we have recognition. So again, this is just kind of simply your normal state of being. If you're walking around, you're walking down the street, you may recognize a bird flying by, you may recognize the sound of a car driving by, or something like this. Your attention and your focus is fairly active. You're seeing an object, you're recognizing it for what it is, the meaning is coming up, and then you're moving your attention and focus onto something else. Same thing with concentration. When you're learning, or even discernment, you're thinking about an idea. You know, in discernment, we talked about this in the second episode, where you're doing a thought experiment. Somebody tells you, you know, well, if you really want to get good at playing the guitar, you should listen to Mozart, and this is going to help you play. So now you say, well, let me think about that for a minute. So then you think about playing the guitar, you think about listening to Mozart. These ideas start to bubble up, and now your focus and attention, as these ideas are bubbling into your mind, your focus and attention is grabbing onto the new things. So it's constantly shifting, grabbing onto something, comparing it one thing to another, getting a generated result. Well, is this accurate? Is this not? If it's not, why is it? So it's a fairly active process. In the alpha states, this is kind of the midpoint between the higher consciousness and the lower consciousness states. You're in a relaxation. You're in visualization and creativity. I would say that you're still actively focusing. Okay, so when you're visualizing, for example, I could say the word palm tree, and you could think of palm tree, but now you may focus on an aspect of the palm tree, like the coconut. Okay, so now your focus went from the general image of the coconut tree, or the palm tree, to now you're focusing on the coconut. Okay, and it is a type of a creative process. I play guitar and I do some improvisation. And a lot of times when I'm playing, I'll get a chord progression going in my mind, and I kind of lay the foundation. And then an idea will come up as a melody to potentially play. And then as I start to actually play that melody, so I'm focusing on the melody, well, now all these other potentials for different variations come into my mind. And then I'll shift my focus onto that other one. So the rhythm of consciousness and or focusing and acute focus and expanded focus is constantly shifting in and out. We're in this kind of creative or visual state. In the theta state, it's even less focused, acute focus. In meditation, memory recall, and intuition, these are all really states of observation. So I know for myself, when I do my mind-clearing meditation, it's really almost impossible to totally clear your mind of completely everything. What often happens, at least in my experience, is that I set the intention to clear my mind, and what I'm really doing is I'm trying to expand my focus and attention to be more than on something very specific. So I may focus my attention on my breathing just to get the ball rolling, and then I'll kind of keep it there and keep my attention focused on my breathing. And then eventually what happens is I start to get used to my focus being on my breathing, and now it starts to kind of expand, and I start to become aware of sounds in the room, or sensations in my body, or other thoughts start to bubble up, and I kind of just try to keep an expanded focus and not grab onto any one thought and try to dissect and dive into it. I'll just kind of step back and breathe and let things wash over me. So this is kind of a more an expanded focus or attention and awareness. Intuition's kind of the same thing. You know, many scientists have and people who have intuitive abilities. Almost everybody has intuitive abilities, not just almost everybody. Everybody has intuitive abilities. And the way that this functions really is we place our focus and attention on one thought form, and then once we have it relatively grounded, we kind of take a step back and we allow the feminine principle to really come in and fill this thought form with other ideas. And that's what the intuition is doing. Memory recall is the same thing. You know, I had an experience a few days ago where I connected with a friend I hadn't spoken to on Facebook in probably 20 years, and I hadn't remembered many of those experiences for a long time. And upon remembering who she was, there was like an instant flash. All of these memories just started to pour into my mind, and I kind of just sat back as the observer and watched all of these things happen. And my focus was less acute. I wasn't trying to grab onto any specific memory and really dial into it, or dissect it, I was just kind of letting everything wash over me in an observation state. So this is the theta state. And finally, we have delta, healing, sleep, detached awareness, and no conscious physical action. So within this state of being, our ability to direct our will through our body is non-existent. All of our will and our attention is focused in the astral or the dream realm. But to make it really concrete, our ability to create with our body, to make choices and actions with our body, is completely non-existent. We're not even aware of our body. All of the choices that we're making are within this dream body, or this astral body, and our physical body is literally completely unconscious. So again, what we're referring to here, the point of this, is that as we gain awareness, and we gain awareness primarily through the principle of mentalism and correspondence, in the sense that as we are accurately able to reflect reality within, creating accurate representations of these objects within our mind, we gain greater awareness. And through greater awareness, a higher mental vibration, we're able to create more choice in our reality, in our physical reality. Now, I'm not also premising or implying that we should always try to be in the gamma state and never be in the delta. No, it's the law of, or the principle of rhythm is going to come in here. There's points, depending on what we're actually trying to do, where it's going to be advantageous for us to be in a lower state of consciousness. And then there's points there's going to be points where it's going to be more advantageous to be in a higher state of consciousness. For example, if a lot of research, when we talk about gamma states, I was researching this, that they talk about fear state being a state of gamma. So, for example, if you're sitting in a quiet room and you hear this really loud, strange noise, it's going to kind of pull your awareness into this high state of consciousness, and you're going to be really focused on everything. You're going to be greatly aware of the sounds in the room, your own physical body. Your heartbeat's going to be racing a little bit. You're going to be physically aware of the sensations in your body. You're going to have an adrenal and an epinephrine response. So you're going to get these biochemicals flowing through your body, these hormones that are going to increase your body's acute ability to be focused and aware of the surroundings. And you're going to be looking for sources. Well, where did that weird sound come from? And you're going to be focusing your attention on, is it that the sound outside? Is it the thing across the room? This is kind of an idea that we're talking about. So again, all of these are various phases, and depending on what our goal is, what we're trying to do, they're going to be different places where our consciousness settles. Okay, so now we're going to get into the idea of personality actualization, and growth, essentially, is what we're talking about here. So we want to describe the nature of personality. Where does personality come from, and how does this relate to natural law and the creator and contracts? And this is all going to be helpful for us in understanding this. So again, taking our logical deduction, our premise from before, the creator of natural law is the first cause of the universe. All things move out from and back to the source. So what we mean by that is that, when we're first born, we come out from the source. Our personality is in potential, okay? And we know, as far as our ability to do things, it's going to be limited because we don't have the knowledge and experience yet. But eventually we're going to start to gain more knowledge and experience, and if we really are associating or identifying with truth, we're going to eventually come to like that quote-unquote Christ consciousness, or very highly moral and aware and enlightened state of being, which starts to take on qualities and attributes of the creator, basically. So personality is a unique fractal of the undivided creator. So again, because I used the color yellow, we're talking about correspondence here. So our personality is a fractal, a unique fractal of the creator. Fractals, if anybody's not heard of that term before, they're a mathematical expression for self-similarity. And all of our reality is essentially fractal. Fractals and the golden mean ratio, which is the spiral of life, or the Fibonacci series. There's many works out there, many researches that are all revealing how our reality is inherently fractal or holographic, meaning that the very big is reflected in the very small, and the very small is reflected in the very big, and vice versa, depending on where your perspective is. So in terms of our logical deduction, because the creator is personal, we are personal. And personality is kind of like the totality of our beingness. It incorporates all of the various facets. It's a mental creation. It uses correspondence. It is vibrational. It has rhythms associated with it. It uses the principle of gender. There's cause and effect. Okay? And each personality is different. So when we think about a fractal, if you were to zoom into a fractal and get really close, well, the further you zoom in, you're going to start to see that it's going to look very similar to the original large fractal that you saw, but there's a unique expression. And then if you zoom out and you zoom into a different point, again, you're going to see that there's a lot of similarity between the 2 points, but in and of themselves, they're very unique. And this extends to personalities. You know, everybody you know, there are similarities between them, of course, but at a certain point along the polarity spectrum, you're going to get into the unique qualities that every personality has. So in that sense, personality in totality is a unique fractal of the undivided creator, the source of all personality. So now we're going to understand the paradox of individuality, because what should kind of be maybe your thinking in your mind, or could be potentially bubbling in your mind, is this idea that we've kind of got two ideas that don't really make sense with each other. First, we talked about how the creator is this singular and absolute and individual, or one personality, and now we're talking about how in the illusion, or in reality, there's infiniteness, manyness. So how do these two ideas reconcile each other? Well, this is how. In the prime reality, the creator is a singular and absolute, or indivisible personality, as we just mentioned, has absolute will and creative potential. Now we know this by logical deduction extrapolation because we have relative will and creative potential. So if the absolute or singular personality, where there is no other personalities, okay, they must have absolute will and absolute creative potential. Okay. Well, number 2, the dream reality narrative. We're going to describe this in a narrative because it's easier to understand. So in the eternal past, the creator chose to experience itself reflectively, creating an illusion of fractal individuations within a dream. Infinite personalities uniquely reflective of the whole. So basically what we're getting at here is that the creator, just like when we dream or when we imagine something, we're omnipresent within our minds. So if I ask you to imagine a beach scene where there's cocktails on a table and this beautiful blue sky and there's palm trees, well, if I want you to focus on the palm trees, bang, you're there. You can immediately go there in your mind. If I want you to focus on the cocktails and how there's a little piece of lemon and a little piece of lime, and the cocktails are orange and there's bubbles fizzling up in the cocktails, well, you can visualize this because you're everywhere present in your mind. You're omnipresent. Okay? Well, using, again, the principle of correspondence, we're going to make a logical deduction or extrapolation and say that the whole of reality is a dream or an illusion within the mind of the creator, which is the prime reality. Okay? And for anybody who's familiar with spiritual works, this is a pretty consistent theme in almost all spiritual works. This idea that reality as we know it is being dreamt of, we're dreams or dreamers within the dream, so to speak. And within the dream we have infinite personalities, infinite individuations or separations, uniquely reflective of the whole. So even though we don't normally think of inanimate objects as personalities, within the spectrum of polarity, okay, we're going to make that supposition. We're going to say that every object, everything, is a reflection of the whole in part, and has an aspect of a personality associated to it in a general sense. And I make that supposition because it's going to help us understand our contractual relationship to things later on. Now, finally, personal beings can be known by other persons, so we can come to know things. That's kind of why I said they're personal. You can know that an object is here, like a lighter or a glass of water or the computer that you're listening to. That's something that you can know. You can come to know it and gain an awareness of it. So we're going to make that supposition that it's an aspect of personality. They are mental, meaning that they have the same properties of mentalism, meaning that for personalities, depending on what order of personality, so we have at the very low order we have inanimate objects. A step up we have biological life. A step up from that we have, plants and animals. We have the higher order intelligent animals. Okay, so they seem to take on unique qualities and facets. Anybody who's had a pet, like a cat or a dog, you can kind of make that supposition. And then finally we have human beings. Okay, and our ability to recognize the seemingly intangible aspects of somebody's personalities is really what identifies a person or a personality. So, you can have a relationship with somebody as a child, and then 50 years later you'll meet them and their whole physical beingness has changed, their voice has changed, everything is about them has changed, but you're still able to recognize that it was your childhood friend. And that is a unique quality of personality, the ability to recognize other personalities. And personalities are responsive to reality and self-realize by free will. What we mean by that is that our ability to actualize or take the infinite potentials of our personality, okay, is dependent on us, what we choose, our free will, and how we choose to make sense of the things that we're experiencing. The response to reality itself is going to dictate how much realization or actualization we have done, which is an agreement basically with everything. And we're going to get into that more specifically here in a moment. So personality, nature, and response. This is what I was talking about a moment ago, where personalities respond to reality. It's like a chemical reaction almost. I'm getting to that in a second. So, first we have awareness. Awareness of reality creates an inescapable response, reflection within the mind. Actualizing personality potentials. Experience like a chemical reaction. Experience is like a chemical reaction for the mind, producing a result based on our choice. So basically what we're getting at here is that within every now moment, to use a New Age type of description, our free will, our awareness is always operating. We cannot get away from it. Even if you're asleep, deeply asleep, or you're in deep hypnosis, you're still reacting to your reality. Even in a dream state, you're still reacting to your reality, except the reality is now a little bit more separated. You have your physical body, which is doing through the healing process, and you have your mental or astral aspect, which is in the dream state or astral realm. So this is a really important concept to understand, because what it means is that, again, it's inescapable. We have no, in this sense, we have no choice but to experience. And while that may seem like a very deterministic perspective, really the freedom here is our ability to choose. We have, in this sense, a binary choice. We can either choose truth or choose falseness. But we have to make a choice. Okay? So, again, when just the fact that we're aware, depending on where our awareness level is going to dictate what form or character the response of reality that comes into us. Okay? Kind of think about it as well like a camera, like an old school or a older type of camera that uses photovoltaic chemicals and an actual plate. So when you open the shutter or you open the lens, light is allowed to come into the camera, and it lands on the photovoltaic lens, and a reaction happens. Okay, and that reaction is dependent on how much the aperture was open, how large the lens was, and ultimately what you were focusing the attention on. So we work exactly the same way. What we choose to focus our attention on, how aware we are of that thing we're focusing because we've understood it either accurately or inaccurately, our knowledge level, is going to determine what is reflected within us. And again, this is based off our free will choice. So free will, the ability to choose how reality is reflected within, is both the source of evil, error, and the source of good, honor with natural law. Okay, so basically what we're getting at here is, because we know that free will exists, we can prove that it exists because we can make mistakes. If free will didn't exist, if we were really just the biological machines that materialist science is trying to convince us we are, then we wouldn't have a choice but to understand reality pretty simply, or pretty accurately, fairly accurately, because it would just come streaming in and we'd just automatically reflect it like a camera lens inside of ourselves. But that's not actually the case. Even if I sit here and I explain to you exactly how to, let's say, cook the perfect omelet, if you don't understand what I'm saying, or you choose not to acknowledge what I'm saying because you're more interested in scrolling through your Facebook and not listening to what my words I'm saying, well, now you're going to have an incomplete reflection of what I'm saying in your mind. You're going to, because you've chosen to ignore it, and as a result, you're going to, when you go to cook this omelet, you're going to be in error. Conversely, it's also the source of good, meaning that we can, because our free will has the ability to choose, we can choose to acknowledge truth and choose to harmonize ourselves with the greater reality. And we're going to be getting into this in great detail here momentarily. So here we have our two choices, choosing truth and choosing falseness. Choosing truth results in clarification of perception. Why? Because when we choose to acknowledge truth, we purify our knowledge base. We gain more real, positive knowledge. And as a result, we're able to recognize more of reality accurately. This creates an awareness of greater realities of moral choice and action, ego transformation. So the response here, when we actually choose to work with the truth and open ourselves to reality, we start to become empowered and transformed. Our sense of self, which is the ego, is transformed. And the image that I associated with this is to the right. It's this woman who's holding her arms out, and she looks pretty happy and empowered, doesn't she? She is choosing truth, and she's kind of having this moment of just total openness and embracing reality, okay? And she's allowing the experience of reality, her response to reality, she's accepting it and choosing to harmonize with it, and as a result, she's having a good experience. Now, when we choose falseness, this results in decreased awareness, ignorance of moral choice and actions. Ignorance requires a defense against reality, normalization. So what do I mean by a defense against reality? Well, because of the reality response aspect of our personality, because we can't help but have some type of a response. If we're identifying ourselves with falseness, if we're trying to ignore reality, there's got to be some thing that literally allows us to ignore reality. We've got to take an action against reality. We've got to make a defense against reality. And in psychology, what we're talking about is normalization. You know, when you first, this just to focus on the term normalization. Normalization refers to when you first experience something that is new or novel to you, it triggers a great response in your psychology or your psychological makeup. But as you continue to expose yourself to the same stimuli, eventually the effect that it has on you becomes less and less and less, to the point where eventually it's just a part of your everyday reality. For example, you know, the first time that you ever saw a car driving down the side of the road, maybe you had this experience of like, oh my God, what is this thing? And it captivates you. You're really focused on trying to understand it and contemplate it and recognize it and whatnot. But eventually, it just becomes commonplace. It's just a normal part of your day. It's become automated. And ignorance has the effect of normalizing things. So when we experience something in reality, if we're identifying with falseness, if we're trying to maintain our sense of self, then we're going to have to normalize it. We're going to have to find a way to defend against it. So, for example, I feel like this is a pretty good example. If you're sitting in a restaurant and you're somebody who doesn't believe that 9/11 was an inside job, so we're talking about 9/11 conspiracy as an example here. You believe that the government is daddy government, and they're here to protect us and help us, and they have our best interests at heart, and they would never do anything intentionally to cause harm or chaos in the world. Okay, this is your solemn belief. Because this belief is part of your knowledge base, it's going to create your ego identification, how you identify yourself in relation to the world. As a result, if somebody next to you starts to have a conversation about, and they're speaking with a friend about various theories about how the 9/11 event happened, they're talking about thermite, they may be talking about dustification from Judy Wood, they may be talking about micro nukes or space weapons or things like this. Well, you're going to have to find a way to block these ideas from being grounded into yourself, because if you let them in, well, now you're going to start to transform. Your mind's going to start to open, and you're going to start to contemplate and question things. And because of your choice to identify with the fact that the government is good and has your best interests at heart, you need to preserve that belief. You need to hide or sequester that knowledge. You have to defend that belief. Okay? So now, upon hearing these people have this conversation around you, you start to think to yourself, well, these are just crazy conspiracy theories. These people are just dumb. They don't know what they're talking about. I have a friend in the police force, and they told me that this is just people who are descending against the government, and these are the bad people, just as bad as a terrorist. And basically what we're talking about is we're talking about creation, aren't we? We're talking about creating more negative knowledge, more inaccurate falseness, so that you can continue to hold on to this erroneous belief. So, as a result, the two choices we have, there's really only two choices. We either choose truth or choose falseness. Okay? We either choose love or choose fear. As a result, we're going to have creation in either the positive knowledge end or the negative knowledge end. Positive knowledge, again, is an accurate representation of reality, and it expands our awareness. We're able to recognize more of the truth in our experience. Conversely, if we choose falseness, now we have to create and build more falseness and more lies and more self-deception to maintain our sense of self and our beliefs. And what we get is ego transformation when we choose truth, where our ego or our sense of self is constantly transforming and expanding. And in the reverse, the opposing choice, we have ego stagnation. Our ego, our sense of self, we're trying to hold on to it, and make it stagnant. And if you look at the image that associates with choosing falseness, we have this guy who's screaming, "No, truth! I don't want to see the truth. Don't show me the truth." And look at how much work he has to do to try to protect himself from reality. He's completely buried himself in the sand. Now, moving to the final point, how this manifests itself in the aggregate, in ourselves and in the greater reality of society. We have determinism versus co-creation. When we choose truth, this leads to personality empowerment. Look at the woman. She's empowered. If somebody comes up and wants to talk to her, she just has to break out of her reverie and look at the person because she's aware. Or, to use a more extreme example, if somebody is potentially coming to inflict harm on her and she needs to take defensive action, well, because she's so aware and willing to receive reality within her, she can probably recognize that this is happening and take a choice to make a defensive action. Conversely, this guy below, when you choose falseness, begets personality determinism. I mean, look at him. Just look at the physical position he's in. I'll let your minds wander a little bit. I mean, this guy is totally at the mercy of his physical surroundings. And he feels like he's the victim of whatever happens. You know, if there's a troop of elephants that come walking by, well, because his head is so buried deeply into the sand, he's not even aware of it, and he just gets trampled. And he feels like, man, you know, reality's, I'm just the victim of my circumstances. I can't do anything. I feel like everything's dominating me. And in the sense it is, because you've chosen not to harmonize, or you've chosen not to use your own personal powers and harmonize yourself with reality. And this is what ends up happening. In the aggregate, life feels deterministic. You feel like you're the victim of your circumstances, opposed to working with or co-creating with them. So just to generally talk about this one last time here, reality has an effect of changing us. We cannot help but be changed by reality. The only thing we can help is to either work with it by choosing truth, or try to work against it by choosing falseness. And either one is going to have different effects. So now we're going to get more specifically into how these phases of reality response manifest over time. So we're going to kind of be going through a causal chain of events, starting at the beginning when we first enter the reality, and then transitioning towards some end stages of ultimacy, like what are the ultimate effects of our ability to ground reality within when we start to actually choose truth. Now, the image I chose for this is the Maslow's self-actualization pyramid, which is on the left-hand side. And then we also have the Eastern philosophy of the chakra system. And these are all aspects of personality attainment or actualization. Again, because for us, personality is being created in the time-space creation as time goes on through experience. When we first come in, it manifests at a certain level, and then it moves up towards a certain level of ultimacy, or a certain level of actualization. So the phases of reality response are: 1, material mind recognizes the mathematical logic of the senses, raw data. So, for example, we start to become familiar with our bodies when we're very young. You know, at first it takes a lot of mental energy to just be aware of the fact that we have arms and legs. And then eventually we start to crawl. And then eventually we can walk. And then eventually we can run. And what we're talking about here is we're starting to accurately represent the realities of our body and the physical sensations we're feeling in our minds. And we're automating these programs that are settling into the unconscious. Well, moving on to number 2, mind reason. Mind reason assembles meanings into knowledge, creating the potential recognition of moral duty, honorable contracts. So initially, like I was just mentioning, you know, it's a cumulative process. As we start to reflect more of reality within our minds, we start to have like these quantum leaps. You know, initially, we just start to recognize our physical relationship to the reality itself, okay? And then eventually we start to develop meanings that have no direct physical correlation. So for example, a cup of water has a meaning in relation to yourself. You can drink it. But the experience of feeling satisfaction from drinking the water, that's almost a super material. It doesn't have a direct physical association to it. To use an even better example, interpersonal relationships are towards the latter end of the mind-reason response. So where we can feel love and compassion or hatred or anger towards another person, well, that person is just a physical body. But the meanings and associations we have within our mind, that's really where the experience of love, compassion, hatred, anger, whatnot, that's really where these realities start to present themselves. And more importantly, this is where our knowledge resides, the correlation or the corresponding associations and meanings that we're creating. Now eventually, as we start to more accurately represent reality within us, we're going to start to build the next phase, which is spirit insight. This is the progressive purification of generated meanings to accurately reflect reality. This increases truth receptivity. So as I've been mentioning continually here, as awareness, our ability to be aware of reality is dependent on how accurately we can recognize the objects in reality. Okay, so for example, the cup of water, when we're first born, I mean, yes, we see that there's this thing in front of us, but we may not even be able to differentiate the fact that there's water versus the background. Okay, then eventually we develop enough recognition to be able to recognize the fact that there actually is a separate object. Okay, and then this continues to expand and expand and expand. And as we choose to associate with truth and we really start to get away from ignorance, there starts to be a unification that happens. And this is the word spirit has been used in many different works, and usually the word spirit is associated to divine or total truth recognition. So when we're talking about spiritual aspects, we're talking about the grand kind of harmony that physical objects have in relation to ourselves, that have in relation to the greater realities of the cosmos in general. So when we talk about spirit insight, we're talking about like the big picture. We're really talking about grand, holistic, big truths, understandings that are going to start to be reflected more and more in our knowledge base. And as we purify our knowledge and we gain greater and greater accurate representations of the objects in reality and in our experience, in our minds, we're going to start to become more receptive to the truth, okay? And we're going to get into how that manifests here in a moment. So eventually we become aware of this thing called morality. You know, morality isn't just a social agreement between people, and that's, even though that's kind of how it's described on Earth, is that, well, there's really no such thing as morality. Morality is whatever we say it is. You know, that's how the laws of many governments and whatnot, countries operate, is that whatever we say is moral is moral. Well, that's not really the case. There is really this thing called morality, and it's based off of this idea of free will and freedom of choice. And how do we actually work with the objects and beings in our reality? Is it through honor? Are we trying to create harmony and honoring their free will choice? Or are we just trumping everything and doing whatever the hell we want? So as we begin to develop a better and better understanding of reality, we become aware of the facet of morality. And this is the idea of true morality, is harmony with natural law. We literally start to identify ourselves with the source or the creator. We become Christ-conscious, to use one term. Okay, where we become truly moral, we become sovereign, okay, where we respect the rights of others. We become anarchists, where we rule ourselves and we don't need to be ruled by any other. That's what the term anarchy actually means. And I'll refer you to Mark Pastio, who has fantastic presentations on natural law. We also did a presentation on this last week, which is episode 3, where we went into the anarchy concept. So the point we're getting at here with this slide is that as we actualize, looking at the pyramid, we go from the physiological, we start to feel safe, we start to feel that we love and belong, we have esteem within ourselves. Okay, now we're actually beginning to ground a lot of these concepts. You know, they start off on the surface. We hear an idea and we're like, oh, that kind of sounds cool. And then as we start to ponder it and really live that idea out in reality, it starts to spiritualize us. We start to become more unified. And spiritual, again, refers to this idea of unity, but also truthfulness. It's accurate. It's real. Okay? And we start to identify more of ourselves, not just with the physical body, but beyond the physical. We start to transcend the physical. We start to identify our ego, our sense of self, starts to become associated with the source, with creator, with the universe. And this is an extremely popular thought form or idea in the awakening community, is that, you know, we need to let go of our ego and just be in the now. Okay, well, I would argue that it's almost impossible to let go of the ego, because the ego is just our sense of self, which is grounded in the physical reality with this body that we're using, that you're using to listen to my words right now. But we can expand that to include more than just this physical body. We can expand that to include as many of the greater realities that we can become aware of. And as we begin to do this, we begin to identify ourselves with more than just this physical body, more than just this time period in our lives, more than just this life. We literally start to go beyond the physical life and go into these other lives and universal identification and spiritual realities. So here's a passage on the Anarchy book. Now, briefly, I just want to talk about the Anarchy book. I was an atheist for many years. I've always been very logical and science-minded, and as a result of being exposed to major religion and having this mind, I kind of had the very polarized point of view of just throwing the whole baby out with the bathwater and calling anything to do with spirituality or creator or God as bunk. But through my awakening experience and learning about hidden cures for cancer, I really started to question a lot of the previous conclusions I had. And one of the works that I came across during this time was The Law of One, which mentions the Anarchy book, and I started to read the Anarchy book. Now, a lot of the concepts in the Anarchy book are profoundly reflective of the reality we're in. The Hermetic book, the Kaibulyan, is a really great introduction to the Anarchy book. And although I feel like the Anarchy book resonates very well with reality in the main, there's also a great deal that I feel like doesn't necessarily relate. And as far as the literal interpretations in the Anarchy book, I think there is some discontinuities. So what I'm trying to get at succinctly here is that while I'm going to discuss some concepts from the Anarchy book, I'm not holding the Anarchy book up as some absolute source of truth and revelation, and we all need to blindly follow it without question. Absolutely not. I would argue that there's nothing in your reality that's going to be any advantage to you by blindly following it with dogma. In order for anything to have any type of real value and empowerment, you're going to have to start to really dig into it and use your mind. That being said, there's still a great many concepts that are shared in this work that have value, and in particular the part on personality. So let's get into this. These three basic factors in reflective thinking, again, because the universe is mental, everything in our minds is a reflection. These three basic factors in reflective thinking may be unified and coordinated in personality development, or they may become disproportionate and virtually unrelated in their respective functions. So basically what we're talking about is that even though the potential for reality to change us and for us to become spiritual and unified is there, it's not a guarantee, because what is the real mechanism? As we just described in the previous slides, the real thing that decides that is you, your choice, your freedom of will, and how you're going to decide to ground these things. And a great way to think about this is, there's people who are incredibly scientific. They have an amazing understanding of, the physical laws, electromagnetism, gravity. They understand chemicals and thermodynamics and have all these really good understandings. But when you ask them a moral question like right and wrong, they have almost no sense of morality. They're willing to completely screw the pooch on somebody else to get their way across, which is a totally immoral type of a thing, and dishonorable, which we're going to get into later. So the point we're getting at here is that your choice, what you choose to focus your attention on, where you choose to build your knowledge, is going to depend on how much unification and personality development you actually have. Continuing on, but when they become unified, they produce a strong character consisting in the correlation of a factual science, meaning an actual true science, a moral philosophy, true sense of morality and understanding, and a genuine religious experience. Now when we say religious experience, I'm not talking about going to church and singing hymns, or going to mosque and listening to the priest recite passages from the Quran. I'm not talking about going to like a church rally or anything like that. What we're really talking about with a genuine religious experience is a more modern term, because this book was written in the 30s, is a spiritual experience, so you could say, or a divine experience. Okay, so what we're really talking about here is that because you have a good grasp of reality, because you've recognized it, because you have a good mental or moral philosophy, because the philosophy is the extrapolated meanings of the physical senses, now you're having a genuine spiritual experience. You're actually recognizing how all of this starts to unify itself in this grand total harmony. You're starting to have a transcendent experience. Alright? Moving on, it is these three cosmic institutions that give objective validity, meaning actual, real, valid, accurate truth. Okay? These three cosmic institutions that give objective validity, reality, to man's experience in and with things, meanings, and values. So what this passage is saying is that the meanings that we create, the experience that we're having, and the values that can later be deciphered by contemplating this are real. Okay? Spiritual values, they actually exist. It isn't just some arbitrary thing. Again, like we talked about morality. On Earth right now, many people, if you were going to ask them, you're going to do a litmus test of what is morality, most people are just going to come up with an answer that suggests they think morality is, well, whatever they say it is. However you want to justify your actions, that's what's moral. Or maybe it's in relation to the laws of society, but that's not really what morality is. So, the values of choices that we make, why choices have value, they actually are real, and we can come to know them. Moving on, it is the purpose of education to develop and sharpen these innate endowments of the human mind, something that education definitely doesn't do now, of civilization to express them, again, something that doesn't happen now, of life to experience and realize them. I would argue that's probably happening for a great many people right now. Of religion to ennoble them, meaning to idealize them, to put them at a high level of idealization so we can reach for them. And of personality to unify them. So basically what this passage is getting at is that all of these various phases, okay, again, like the natural laws, we have the 7 principles of natural law. All of these things are coming together and working within personality, and personalities operating all these various levels to actualize them. Moving on, a personality can look before it leaps and can therefore learn from the looking as well from the leaping. So that for us as human beings, this is critically important. We have the ability, using our minds, to actually imagine something and have the experience associated with that imagining. You know, I at one point in my life, I've had this actually happen a few times, that I had a dream where I killed somebody in my dream. And I mean, when I killed them, I literally took them and like bludgeoned their head on the pavement. I mean, I don't want to get too graphic, but the point I'm getting at is it was a very real experience. And the response to me physically, I felt it. When I woke up, I felt like I had literally killed somebody, and it was a kind of a moment where I'm wondering, Jesus, why did I even do that to somebody? How could I do that to somebody? I didn't think I was capable of doing that. You know, so the point I'm getting at is through the process of imagining and doing this thought experiment of testing a premise, we can learn tremendously, which is an amazing ability that we have. And this particular aspect is going to help us in our discernment to determine whether or not we're acting honorably or dishonorably. Moving on, intelligence alone can discriminate as to the best means of attaining indiscriminate ends, but a moral being possesses an insight which enables him to discriminate between ends as well as between means. So what we're talking about here is that a moral being, again, when we're talking about spiritual insight, a moral being is going to be holistic. They're not just going to cherry pick the things that allow them to justify what they're doing and be damned with anybody else. They're actually going to resonate, or they're going to look for the truth, and they're going to try to see the whole picture, which is what this next statement says. And a moral being in choosing virtue is nonetheless intelligent. He knows what he is doing, why he is doing it, where he is going, and how he will get there. So again, we're talking about a grand consciousness, grand awareness, aren't we? A moral being is somebody who's aware, has a high state of awareness, a high state of mental vibration, in the sense that they're aware enough of what all the various facets of what they're doing to make sure that they're acting morally, they're acting honorably with respect to others, they're respecting others, and they're looking for the ramifications of their actions to make sure that they're not creating any unanticipated disharmony. So now we're going to get into the actual logical basis to contractual reality. You know, when we talk about contractual reality, what are we talking about? Well, the logical deduction here is the creator's will is absolute in context and power within the prime reality only. Within the corresponding illusion or the dream, the creator's will is divided into personalities of relative power and creative expression. And therefore, the creator's will and creature's will are always harmonized in eternity. And seeming disagreement always leads to reunification. So basically what we're getting at here is that in eternity, okay, where all of time and space has unfolded and we're at the beginning, or at the total end, the ultimate end of everything, well, all of our mistakes, all of our divergencies, all of our disharmonies are going to be reunified, and our will be unified back with the Creator's will. Okay, a good example of this is, in a limited sense, within a human lifetime. You know, if I'll just share myself a good story. There was a time in my early 20s and my late teens where I was a big drug addict, and I had a major problem with drugs, and I was doing a lot of immoral things. I was stealing from my family, stealing from my friends, lying to anybody I needed to get my way and get what I needed done. And eventually I kind of, even though at the time I justified my actions, eventually I started to realize that the actual total effects of what I was doing was not helping me. And I had a change of heart and decided I wasn't going to do this anymore. I reflected on my karma, so to speak, and decided I was going to change and really heal within myself. And now I'm at the point where I wouldn't even conceive of lying because I feel like that'd be doing a huge disservice to my fellows. And I realize at a very conscious, not only logical level, but from a heart level, that acting honorably with honesty and integrity is really the best way to help not only transform myself to be better, but also help transform the world and others. So the point I'm getting at here is that the nature of causality, of karma, the universe is built in with this mechanism. Even though we have free will and we can be in error, that's okay, because what's going to happen is when we go into error, we're going to experience karma. The universe is going to say, that's all right, no problem. You wanted to make that choice? That's cool. You have that choice. But this is what happens when you make that choice. And are you sure you want to make it? Maybe you want to try to do something else. And you know what? Take as much time as you need. If you want to be a tyrant for the next 10 lifetimes, no problem. You have all the time you need. But eventually, you're going to come back into unity. Okay? And really what we're talking about here is this is how the Creator's will and our wills harmonizes even when there's seeming disagreement. Because within time, this seems like there's divergency. So it's only within the dream, only within the illusion, that seeming disagreement can take place. Okay? Just like in the example I used before about killing somebody. It's only within that dream that I experience the act of killing somebody. When I step out of the dream, okay, that desire seems crazy. I wouldn't want to do that to anybody. And then I have a reunification of my will, and I realize even though going through that experience in the dream, it didn't go away. It's still there. But in totality, in the aggregate, okay, there is a reunification back to this harmonized will. And that's what's going to be happening in the great eternity of the creation. Within our lifetime, within the reality that we're living now, we're really talking about the great work. We're talking about the fact that our world has been darkened by dishonorable dealings and sorcery and people acting with manipulation and deception and whatnot. And that has the effect of creating disharmony in the world. And it has been allowed to proceed because of the profound level of ignorance, because you have to ignore it, because of the reality response. You have to develop a way of defending against this. But eventually, the walls can only be built so high, and then they start to fall in on themselves. And that's what's happening. This is the time that we're living in right now, is that truth is being poured out. The apocalypse has happened in the sense that information is pervasive everywhere. And really now it's just a matter of choice for you to start to actually look and understand and ground your experience. So within the contract, why is there a contract? How is this the basis for contractual reality? Well, the only way two free will beings can come in together and to come into contract, meaning they can take togetherness, and tract, be on the same tract, is through agreement. Okay, this is how the wills, the Creator's will and the individuated wills are in harmony with each other. And there's always co-creation. Even if you think about the most horrible agreement that you can imagine, at some level, there's still co-creation happening. Okay? So a contract or agreement is the ability of all personalities, which are individuations of the Creator, to harmonize wills via consent, either honorably recognizing truth or dishonorably ignorance of truth. All agreements are co-creative, but not all agreements are honorable. And we have this picture of the two people shaking hands, so they are in agreement. Alright, so this is probably one of the most important slides in this presentation. This is kind of like the keys to discerning whether or not what we're doing is honorable or not. Again, how are we manifesting our desires? Are we manifesting our desires dishonorably or honorably? Are we choosing to honor the natural rights of others and educate ourselves on the potential effects? Or are we just ignoring whatever happens and we're going to get our goal done, be damned anything else? So what are the four aspects of a contract? Well, first, we have in blue, because it relates to the mental, an awareness, intention to create cause. Desire, generated by awareness as an idea or goal, potential action, and co-creation. So because we've been aware of some aspect in a reality, we're going to have a desire to do something. And now, as a result of that desire, there's going to be generated a method or way of manifesting this desire. And this leads us into number 2, the offer. So we have to offer this method to somebody or something. A meeting of the minds, okay? So what we have when we have an offer is a communication with others to ensure minds are in harmony with each other. And natural law. Again, this is an honorable contract that we're talking about here. So if we're acting honorably, if I have a desire to, let's say I'm living with some roommates and I'm a drummer and I want to play me drums at 10 o'clock at night for a couple hours, well, if I'm acting honorably, before I manifest my desire, before I start to go play my drums, anybody who's potentially affected by my actions, I want to go talk to them and just at the very least let them know what's going on. And I'm also going to ensure that I'm in harmony with natural law. That's what that statement is referring to, is that we're going to go talk to them because they have a choice. We recognize the fact that my actions are going to affect somebody. Now, because this thing that is being affected, they're a type of personality that actually has the ability to communicate their ideas and goals. Well, now we have the moral obligation or the moral awareness to go and have a meeting of the minds and make sure that their mind is in harmony with our minds and that we're actually together. We're on a contract. So in this process, we're going to go through discovery of unanticipated effects leading to renegotiation of the original idea if potential disharmony is discovered. So if we go to our roommate and we say, listen, I just want to let you know I plan on playing the drums at 10 o'clock every Thursday and Saturday, and just wanted to let you know. And they say, well, listen, I work third shift and I'm sleeping at that time. Is there any way maybe that you can do it at a different time during those days? Well, because we're acting honorably, because we are in honor of natural law, we're seeking to understand if anybody who's affected has an opinion. And we want to make sure that their mind is in harmony with our mind with respect to this method or this desire we have. Now, the methods that we use to have a meeting of the mind or communication is full disclosure and transparency. We're going to fully disclose the desire. We're not going to try to hide any part of it. And we're going to be transparent. This could involve multiple disclosures to others, preventing misunderstanding. So we're not just going to go to one of our roommates and be like, oh, well, I got consent from them, so I don't need to worry about everybody else. No, anybody who's affected, we're going to try to go and talk to and ensure that they're on the same page with us. Number 3, acceptance. All beings affected, including the originators, agree to the potential action. Explicit communication is used to ensure consent is freely given. So the word explicit means it's a direct statement. It's not implied. So for example, when I go to my friend and I say, hey, listen, I'm going to play drums at 10 o'clock tonight. We go through the negotiation, and then he says, okay, well, after we talked, you agreed that you're going to go and play your drums instead of on Thursday. Instead of playing it at 10 o'clock at night because I'm sleeping that day, you're going to play it at 2 in the afternoon. Are we on the same page here? Yes, we're on the same page. Okay, I agree. You agree? Yes, I agree. So you hear how it's very explicit, it's very direct and clear? That's what an explicit statement is, or explicit consent is. Number 4, we have consideration, or generation. Willing individuals act as one mind to create the goal. The result reveals their actual knowledge of potential effects, or lack thereof. Errors in planning, negotiation are revealed. So basically what we're talking about here is that because we've done our due diligence, we've done the very best we can to ensure that all of our roommates and even the neighbors are aware of everything, we're we're going to go ahead, everybody agrees, and we're going to actually do this thing. So now, because they know what my intention is, and we all agree, we're all of the same mind. We're all of one mind because there was a meeting of the minds. There was a correspondence or a reflection of my mind in the other person's mind. Okay? So we're in harmony with natural law in this sense. It's very, very simple in that sense to understand. But the result reveals the actual knowledge of potential effects. So what I'm getting at with this statement is kind of like the karma aspect. Even though we're going to try our best to negotiate and act transparently and with full disclosure with everybody, there's some times where we just, despite the best laid plans of mice and men, we are going to make mistakes. We may not anticipate something. There may be a neighbor that was away when we were walking around the building, and they arrived, and now they're kind of upset that we're playing drums, and they come down and they knock on the door. And even though we did our darndest to try to make sure that everybody knew, this guy's kind of upset. And he's like, it's 10 o'clock at night and you're playing the drums. What the hell? Wow. So what I'm getting at here is that even though we're going to do our best in an honorable contract to transparently reveal our desires, make sure we renegotiate any potential problems, search for violence if we find it, and make sure we're not incurring violence on others, there's still going to be the potential for error. And we always need to be willing to actually look at the reality of what was created versus what the goal of what we were trying to create. Okay, so here we have an example of honorable contracts in even more detail. So honor is the recognitions of one's desire potentially affecting others, identification with truth. As a result, we create honorable methods and awareness of moral duty when observing violence against others. So if our goal is going to inflict violence against somebody, and the term violence in here simply means any time an action that we're taking is going to violate somebody's sovereign rights. So for example, in the case of playing the drums, if I'm talking to my friend about playing the drums at 10, and he says, well, I can't really have you play drums then because I'm sleeping, can we do it another time? I say, well, be damned with your work, I'm going to play my drums anyway. Well, now they've explicitly told me what their desire is and that they want to renegotiate, and now I'm choosing to ignore their free will and do what I want anyway. So I'm violating their will. Okay? In a more direct sense, if we could say that if we observe somebody being beaten to death and we do nothing, okay, then we're complacent. But if we see that this is happening, we act to do something to prevent this violation or this violence from happening, well, now we're acting honorably in relation to others. And the ideal modality of this that we're shooting for is non-presumptive agreements. We don't want to presume that somebody consents or not. Okay? And what I mean by that is, for example, if we're playing our drums and we ask nobody, we just say, I'm going to play my drums and hopefully everybody agrees. Well, if my friend who's sleeping in the other room, if he doesn't get up and rip the drumsticks out of my hands, or if he doesn't say anything, well, now, based on his behavior, I can presume that he agrees, because he hasn't taken any action against me to say don't. So that's a presumptive agreement. In honorable contracts, we want to try to get away from presumptive agreements as much as possible. We want to take the initiative and go and ask and make a statement and say, listen, is this okay? I'm about to do this. Now there is no presumption because they gave us an explicit statement of consent. Moving on. A desire acted upon creates effects which impact other things and beings. As such, before one can act on their desire, it is analyzed for potential violence. This is what I was talking about before about we have an amazing ability called our imagination. With our imagination, we can do a thought experiment. We can literally think with our minds about the potential goal and determine, based on our knowledge and awareness, who is going to be affected. You know, playing my drums at 10 o'clock at night means that the neighbors are going to be affected. We're going to actually try to renegotiate with these potentially affected people. We're going to disclose to them transparently our desire so that we can get their opinion. Okay? And if we do find violence, we're going to try to change the method so that violence doesn't occur. Moving on, honor of natural law is recognition of personal sovereignty, a being's ability not to agree. Methods are full disclosure and transparency of intent, which we've been talking about. If the intent potentially inflicts violence or violates their sovereign rights, the intent is abandoned, meaning that you decide you're not going to play the drums anymore, or renegotiated to ensure violence does not occur. So, using the example I just mentioned before, if my roommate says, listen, I would really appreciate it if you didn't play the drums at 10 o'clock at night the day that I'm trying to sleep, well, let's renegotiate. Okay, well, what works for you? Was 2 o'clock better? Yeah, actually 2 o'clock's better for me. Okay, great. Well, now we've changed the method. My original goal is still being manifested, but now I'm in harmony with somebody else. Now we've created a harmonious contract, an honorable contract. Moving on, explicit consent ensures each being and their unique perspective can be taken into consideration, facilitating renegotiation of the intent when disagreement is discovered. Honesty or transparency. So again, what we're doing is, because we are gaining explicit consent, when a being actually has the ability to speak their mind and vocalize their mind to me and tell me I agree or I don't agree, that's explicit consent. Recognizing that ability in somebody obviously requires an accurate level of awareness and understanding. But the point here is that in doing that process and actually taking the initiative to go talk to somebody and ask for their consent, the potential for renegotiation is going to come in to the situation. And it allows you to recognize that they have free will choice. And this is a powerful, powerful way of working, because you literally enhance somebody's ability to use their free will. You know, it's in that sense, when you act honorably with others, it enhances their ability to use their will co-creatively versus feeling like things are just happening to them. So, how does this manifest itself in the aggregate in society? What ends up happening with the continued use of honorable contracts and honorable methods, we have freedom and righteousness. Acting honorably extends freedom of choice to others. This builds true knowledge via experience, because now, when we go to talk to our friend, they have the ability to choose and use their free will, and they have the ability to think about, you know, well, how can I harmonize my desires with my friend's desires? Okay, this enhances awareness of moral choice and educates the masses on how to be truly free over time. So one characteristics with honorable contracts that probably should be presenting itself is that it requires more energy and effort in the short term. You know, it's a lot easier to say, screw my roommates, I'm going to just play my drums whenever the hell I want, and if it pisses somebody off, then that's their problem. Well, how much work and energy did I have to do to help them understand my desires at that point? I didn't have to do any. I just picked up my drumsticks and started playing. Conversely, if you're trying to act honorably, you may have to talk to not only your roommates, but all of your neighbors, and it may require renegotiation with each one of those people. So it's going to require a lot more time and energy, and you may, and even at the end of all that, because you realize that somebody is going to be greatly affected by your drum playing. Maybe your friend that wakes up, there's just no way to work with him, and you have to play your drums maybe at another friend's house. Okay? Now you may have to completely abandon your original desire and change your desire to work more in harmony with others. So the point I'm getting at here is that in the short term for yourself, honorable contracts are going to be more of a burden, in the sense that you're going to have to work more honestly and transparently with others. It's going to take, generally speaking, more time and energy to manifest. But there's an upshot. Because you're extending freedom of choice to everybody else around you, the cumulative effect is greater and greater degrees of harmony. You're kind of leading by example. You know, using the example of drumming with our roommate, or drumming with your roommates, maybe one of your roommates is always used to just doing whatever they want and be damned everybody else. But now, because you lead by example and you take them into consideration and you actually ask their opinion, you're kind of setting a new precedent that maybe that's how they should act with their desires, especially if the end result is beneficial. So the point is that the methods that we're working with, the honorable methods, the means, okay, are going to be cumulative. The more and more we act honorably with each other and our fellows and ourselves, eventually over time we're going to start to really build true knowledge in others. They are going to start to become more unified in their personality attainment because of that, and we're going to start to have a greater degree of harmony in society at large. More righteous action. Okay, well now we're going to apophatically, to use Mark's term, Mark Passio, which I got that from his natural law presentation, which I feel like is such a great term. And what apophatic means is that it's understanding a concept within the negative, so what it is not. So now we're going to understand what honorable contracts are by analyzing dishonorable contracts. And I would argue that it's easier for many people to understand dishonorable contracts because we usually have a lot more experience with them in our worlds, because our world is inherently right now dishonorable. That is the condition of humanity, although that is not the nature of humanity. Briefly, I'm just going to go back up here. I forgot to mention this. What does the word wizardry refer to? Well, wizardry and sorcery are two words that Julian and I have been using on the blog to describe these concepts of honor and dishonor, because we got them from Mark Passio. Again, in one of his podcasts, he analyzes the Lord of the Rings movies, and one of the allegories in the movie is that Gandalf, who is a wizard, a white wizard, is when he wants to get his desires manifested, when he's trying to get his goals to destroy the ring and do all of this, and the people that he recruits to help him, the way he does this is by transparently revealing his desires to them, operating with full disclosure for the most part, and he doesn't tell them that they have to do what he says, okay? What he implores them to do is to come to reason and realize that what he's saying is the best way, so now they're in agreement. And really what he's doing is he's acting honorably. He's using an honorable method of conduct and contract. The other thing I like about here is that when we talk about honorable dealings, we're not talking about total passivity. He's got a sword in his hand, which means that when he sees violence being inflicted against others, there's a moral duty to do something, whether or not it's to say something, whether or not it's to take force of action to prevent somebody from beating somebody to death, or whatnot, okay? So conversely, moving down to slide about sorcery, we have the wizard Saruman. And in the movie Saruman, or in the Lord of the Rings movie, Saruman has been corrupted by dark forces. He's using deception, manipulation, and coercion, and outright force or violence to suppress the wills of others into his will. Okay, so he's a really good example of sorcery or dishonorable conduct in contracts. So let's get into this here. Dishonor is ignorance or willful disregard for one's desire affecting others. Identification with falseness. So we have this desire that has been created because of our awareness, and now these methods for manifesting our desire, and we don't give a damn what anybody else thinks. Or even worse, we don't give a damn what anybody else thinks, which is probably the worst one because we actually are aware of it. Or we're ignorant of it. We're identified so much with ignorance, we're just not sensitive and aware of how our actions affect others, because we're just so blocked off to the world. This is why choosing ignorance prevents people usually from even developing a sense of morality, because they just don't have enough of reality recognized within their mind to even see that there is this thing called true morality. So, a goal is upheld as justifiable, generating methods which are inherently deceptive. Now, I say inherently deceptive because if your goal, if I want to play my drums, I know at some level that playing my drums is going to affect others. And if I justify my goal as, well, I need to get better at my drums, and if people around me, they don't like it, well, screw them, I need to do it anyway. Well, I'm kind of deceiving myself. I'm lying to myself and saying, I'm justified in doing this, even if it affects other people, because it doesn't matter. My goal is superior, and their goal is inferior. Their goal of having quiet is inferior, okay? So it's an inherent deception, and it also tries to acknowledge you as being somehow better than other people, which again is a deceptive or an inaccurate premise. Moving on, usually these methods are in violation of natural law, meaning you usually are inflicting violence on others. You're not recognizing their sovereign rights and not trying to get explicit agreements or consent. And in dishonorable contracts, the ideal is usually presumptive agreements. So even though somebody may tell you, well, listen, I don't want you to play the drums, because when I actually do go to play the drums, they stay in their room and they don't come out, even though they told me not to. I'm gonna cherry pick. I'm gonna choose what part of my reality justifies my conclusion and only focus on that. And that way, the next day when they come to me and say, "Hey, man, I told you I didn't want you to play the drums," and your response is, "Well, you didn't come out and stop me from playing the drums, so obviously you agreed to me." That's a presumptive agreement. That's a presumption, and in that sense, you're identifying with a false idea. Moving on, the ends justify the means. So pretty clear colloquialism or cliche from modern society. The ends justify the means. We hear this a lot. Methods employ deception. We're deceiving either ourselves or others. Coercion. We're using force or threats of violence to force people to agree with us. We're using manipulation in various ways. Maybe we're using mind control, maybe we're using deception, maybe we're manipulating events so that they don't find out the truth, etc. And the maintenance of ignorance in others versus sharing the truth. So, for example, maybe our friend tells us, hey, listen, I just started my new job and I'm going to be working third shift, so I'm going to be sleeping during the nighttime. So, it would be nice if maybe you guys could try to keep it quiet while I'm sleeping. He just says this in passing. Well, in your mind, you know that you intend to play the drums at 10 o'clock at night. So by not sharing and being fully disclosed with what your intention is, you're maintaining ignorance in others, which is a way to manipulate them. Okay? Moving on, we have requires deceivers and the deceived. So people who are actively deceiving and people who are believing the deception and therefore agreeing. People consciously agreeing with the plan of deception, and those unconsciously agreeing by accepting the deception. So a great example of this, I feel like, is the medical industry, a doctor. You've either got doctors who know that the whole medical industry, for the most part, as far as curing cancer and imbuing people with knowledge about true health, is a total fraud. And a lot of the medications and health practices we have are not really making us healthy. So there's some doctors who are aware of that, and despite that knowledge, they're like, well, you know what, screw it, I'm making money. This is what everybody else is doing, so it must be morally okay, because what everybody else does is what is moral, and you know what, it's okay, it's perfectly fine. And then you got the other kind of doctor. Then you got the one who's duped or deceived. They actually really believe that they're helping people. They really believe that the methods they're using are the best that's available. And in this sense, they're going along with the deception. Now, implied consent. This is a big one. Implied consent is given when violence is observed and no action is taken to stop the violence. Action or inaction in harmony with the plan implies consent, whether conscious or not. So a great example of this is, let's imagine you're in the supermarket, You observe this mother and her small child, maybe a toddler like 4 or 5 years old, and they're walking through the store, and you see this kind of unscrupulous man kind of been following around. You've noticed it a couple times, and so you're just kind of observing it. And at one point, the mother gets separated from the child because she has to talk to somebody maybe she recognizes a friend, and you see this guy go and he grabs the child, okay, and he takes off. Well, if you choose to do nothing in this situation, you are consenting to this child being taken. You are consenting to this child being kidnapped. And the reason why is because the kidnapper, in their mind, their goal, their contract, okay, their method of operating is to take this child. The only way to do this effectively is to make sure that nobody else finds out, or that they agree by complacency. So they take no action, because that's his goal, is to take the child. So even if you recognize this, okay, and you choose to do nothing, well, your choice to do nothing is in an agreement with his plan. He needs people to do nothing in order to affect his plan, in order his plan to work out. So whether you're ignorant because you don't recognize the fact that this is happening, or whether you are aware of it and choose to do nothing, you're still in harmony with the plan. You may have all sorts of excuses like, well, I'm not strong enough, I'm not a police officer, I don't know this person, it's not my place to say anything. All of these excuses, okay, whether it's conscious or not, are giving consent. It's implied consent. You may not verbally walk up to this guy and say, hey, by the way, I know you're going to take this kid and I'm cool with it, so just do it, I got your back. That's an explicit consent. But by choosing to not take action, when we see violence happening to another and we choose not to do something, we are agreeing to the dishonorable action, and in that sense, we're morally culpable, which we're going to get into extensively, most likely, in next week's presentation. So what happens in the aggregate? What happens in society as a result of this? Well, we get slavery and ignorance. Because dishonorable contact, for using the example above, because you have to justify your inaction and not helping this child by saying, I'm not good enough, it's not my place, it's not this, it's not that, we have to build walls of ignorance, just like the guy who was burying his head in the sand. He had to build walls of defense against reality. So as time goes on, more dishonorable contracts are either pushed by you, acknowledged by you because of your implied consent, or allowed to happen because you choose to not take action. We get more slavery and ignorance over time in society. Freedom of choice is taken by deception and coercion. This prevents true knowledge from being acquired. To use the doctor example, because the patient has no idea what real health is, they don't have real knowledge, they're just dependent on what the doctor says, and they are being deceived because they believe the tenets of the medical industry. Okay, they're not really empowered with any choice. Most people don't even really have a sense of what makes them healthy. So they don't really have true knowledge and being able to empower themselves with habits and choices that allow them to be healthy. So as a result of these dishonorable contracts coming from the medical industry, being pushed by the people in the medical industry, by the patients who accept these choices, all of this just creates more slavery or dependency, which is another word for slavery, and ignorance over time. Okay, so we're going to get into the 3 classes of contracts. I'm going to reuse, most likely, these slides in next week's presentation when we go into moral culpability, because they're going to be essential for us to understand not only why moral culpability is important. Moral culpability isn't about assigning blame so we don't have to do any work. It's quite the reverse. In the presentation I'm going to be doing here, we're going to be determining moral culpability so we can be empowered to see how we contributed to the effect, so that we can take on whatever empowering knowledge that we can to ensure that it either doesn't happen in the future or we're creating more harmony in the future. So we have 3 classes of contracts in life, 3 general categories. All actions, mental and physical, are co-creative agreements between other things and beings. How we choose to manifest our desires creates either harmony or disharmony within and without. The requirements of an honorable contract can be used as a discernment filter for one's methods. Am I acting honorably or dishonorably? So, what are the three classes then? We have personal with oneself. So in the image to the right, we have a girl hugging herself. I chose hugging because I felt like it was a good example. You know, she's hugging herself, she's accepting herself, she's choosing truth and choosing to be open to herself. Okay, so this is an example of an agreement with ourselves. Interpersonal with other things and beings. We have a couple that are holding and embracing each other. And universal or holistic. This one's a little more abstract, but once we get into it, you'll see it. It's really pretty easy to understand. This is with groups of beings and systems. So ourself in relation to the world, for instance. So let's dial into these. Personal contracts. So obviously we have a man looking at himself as the image because a personal contract is made with ourselves, how we choose to understand the truth about ourselves, the creature-creator relationship. Now, basically what I'm getting at with the creature-creator relationship is because personality is this aspect of the creator that is quote-unquote gifted to us or bestowed to us, okay? We've got kind of a contract with the creator. Okay, we have an agreement to actualize ourselves, to actually use the experience that we've chosen to enter into, or we wouldn't be here. So it's kind of like an implied agreement in that sense. And we have again the two modes of how this agreement is going to play out. We have an agreement to know ourselves, know the creation, know the world around us, and live out those realities, and that's an agreement essentially with the creator. So honorable dealings with oneself or honorable agreements with oneself are choosing truth, searching for, opening to, and following the truth wherever it leads. Okay? This as a result of creating ego transformation, so our sense of self is constantly transforming and evolving. Evolution and purification of knowledge, increasing awareness of moral choice. So as we start to honor our own personal agreements and really honor ourselves, we start to really enhance our personality attainment, become more spiritualized, more receptive to the truth, and eventually we reach that we reach that quantum bubble of moral choice. We start to actually be aware of real moral choice. A good example of a contract with yourself is, let's say you're a smoker and New Year's Eve comes and you say, you know what, next year I'm not going to smoke anymore, and you have this agreement with yourself not to smoke. Well, as the weeks and months go on, all of a sudden you start to feel tempted. Maybe you have something happen, like a tragedy, like you lose your job, or a friend or relative ends up passing away, and you feel really stressed and you feel tempted to continue to smoke again. Now, if you break that agreement, there's going to be certain effects that happen as a result. We may feel less confident about ourselves. We may think, well, you know, man, I always set these goals and I can never see them through to the end. And we're going to start to build like this idea of ourselves that may be kind of disempowering. The point with an honorable agreement is we're going to be searching for the truth and following it wherever it leads. So that what we're getting at with that is that if your goal is to quit smoking, but you don't really realize the true essence of what you get out of the activity of smoking, and you just kind of try to steamroll your way through it, like, well, you know what, I'm going to quit smoking, damn it, and I'll just get through it and make my way through it. Well, most addictions, I would say all addictions, are reflective of something inside of us that we're using that external symbol of to generate, so that, you know, if we're addicted to smoking, we've got a little oral fixation going. Maybe if we're addicted to chocolate, maybe we have this feeling that we're not satisfied with life and we need to eat more physical chocolate to feel satisfied. But the point I'm getting at here is, if we're choosing truth, if we have a moment where we're tempted to break our agreement with ourselves, the reaction shouldn't be to damn yourself and say you're this horrible person. The reaction should be, well, thank you. Now I have this new information. Now I have this empowering data that I can use to try to better understand who I really am and really recognize why I was making the smoking in the first place. If I'm feeling tempted to smoke when I'm feeling stressed, well, maybe it's because I need to understand how I've defined these things that make me feel stressed. And why does smoking alleviate that for me? There's some relationship, there's a corresponding relationship that can be learned and developed. Okay, so this is an honorable agreement with oneself. A dishonorable agreement with oneself is choosing falseness, ignorance of, closing to, and turning away from the truth when it suits us. This is ego stagnation and deformation of knowledge, increased awareness of moral choice. So basically, an example of a dishonorable agreement with ourselves is we choose that we're going to stop smoking. We are tempted to to continue smoking, and we say, well, you know what? Well, my mother just died, so I can smoke now. And we don't do any self-reflection. We don't really even question this automatic desire. We just run right into it, and now it's like we never made the agreement at all. And we really almost learn nothing from the experience, because now we've justified it to ourselves. Well, my mother, she died, and that's the reason why I have to continue to smoke. But we haven't really learned anything. We haven't transformed ourselves through knowledge and searching for it. So what ends up happening is we end up having ego stagnation. The true cause of why we chose to smoke in the first place is still unknown to us because we haven't dug deep enough. And this has the effect of deforming our knowledge over time. Instead of purifying it, it deforms it. And of course, this decreases our awareness of moral choice. Interpersonal contracts with others. Interpersonal contracts are made with other beings whenever our ideas or actions affect another. So here we have an image of this couple. They're sitting on the train tracks. So maybe they made a choice to kind of hang out and have this nice personal time in front of the train. And maybe her desire is that she wants to sit on the train tracks and wait as long to see if the train comes, and he's got to agree with her or not. So this is just an example of how two people can have an agreement with each other. So what does an honorable agreement look like? Well, agreements with others is choosing truth, sharing ideas transparently, allowing for negotiation and acting with explicit consent when possible. So when we talk about others, we could extend this to inanimate objects, plants, animals, things like this. I wanted to kind of keep it relatively simple and only work with human beings who have the ability to get explicit consent. And we're going to get into the other phases of interpersonal contracts in next week's presentation. But just to keep it real simple, when we're working with others, we have the ability to talk to them. If I want to play my drums at 10 o'clock at night, my friends or my roommates, they have the mind. As a personality, I can recognize, because as we talked about before, that they are also personalities. They have a mind, and I can speak to them, and we can share ideas and negotiate. So that's what we're going to try to do if we're acting honorably. In addition, we also acknowledge the natural law rights of others, and we're not looking for presumptions of consent. We're looking for explicit consent whenever possible. A dishonorable agreement with others is choosing falseness, hiding our true desires from others, deception, coercing others into agreement, manipulation, accepting implied consent, complacent action from others as evidence of agreement, despite explicit statements of non-consent. Here we're ignoring natural law rights of others, and we're focusing on presumptions of consent. So again, using the example I made earlier, if I have the desire to play drums at 10 o'clock at night, and my friend comes and tells me, listen, I'm going to be sleeping, so please try to keep it down while I'm sleeping. He may not know exactly why or what my intention is, so in that sense I've manipulated him because I haven't transparently revealed my desires to him. That's one count of dishonorable conduct or a dishonorable agreement. And then when 10 o'clock comes around, I just start playing my drums. And he may even wake up and kind of like smicker to himself and say something, but because he doesn't actually come out and tell me, hey, don't play the drums, dude, I'm trying to, sleep, I take his inaction as as implied consent, a presumption of consent. Okay? So this is an example of how honorable and dishonorable contracts with interpersonal relationship can flesh out. And again, we're going to get into this heavily in detail in next week's presentation. Okay, our last slide. We have universal contracts with groups or systems. So universal contracts are made with groups of beings or systems, when our idea or actions affect whole things, i.e. environments or planets. Recognition of interconnectedness. So here we have a great image, I feel like. We have the girl on the right. She's kind of blissfully ignorant, just walking through life. She's so focused on, her hot date with her boyfriend, or, going out to dinner with her friends, or meeting her mother for coffee, or whatever it is she's going to, so that she just takes her can of soda and she just throws it over her shoulder, like, oh, doesn't exist anymore, it's not there. Well, that's not true. Her actions and the things that she does affect others, and it affects the whole world in a universal way. In this particular instance, it affects the environment. I mean, she's in a city, so there's no plants growing, but you can imagine if she was at a field where food was growing and this can lands in the field, all the dyes and toxins that are in the can, the aluminum, they're going to start to leach into the soil, and they're going to start to degrade the quality of life in the soil and the environment. And granted, it may not cause a pandemic, but her actions are definitely negatively affecting the environment. They're creating disharmony. So when we talk about universal contracts, what we're really talking about is how our actions subtly affect great things. Okay? And what we have here is an example of somebody who's on the other end of the spectrum. His actions are positively affecting it. So let's get into this a little bit here. Basically, when we're acting honorably with groups or systems, we're choosing truth, and it's an acknowledgement of our goals and actions affecting whole things, the butterfly effect of ourselves in life. So basically, every single thing, every thought we think, what we choose to focus our attention on, what knowledge we choose to empower ourselves with or not empower ourselves with, every single thing we do is going to affect a group or a system. Absolutely everything. This is characterized by a desire to know the truth about one's actions, expand knowledge of self and the universe relationship, the self and universe relationship, okay? It's characterized by constant self-reflection, discernment, and transformation. So basically the self-universe relationship, we went from the self, contracts with self, to interpersonal beings. Now we're kind of at the grand scale, and again it's kind of coming back to the self, so we've got this kind of torus effect or looping effect here. So what we're getting at here is that ourselves, what we do, relates to the universe in some way. There's a corresponding relationship depending on the context you're using, your point of view. And if we're really choosing to be honorable with groups and systems, we're constantly reflecting on ourselves and what our actions are doing. What are our actions doing to the environment? We're using discernment, and we're trying to transform ourselves and become more harmonious and honorable in relation to our interactions with the environment in general and in other things, which are people. Dishonorable agreements with groups is choosing falseness, ignorance of our actions and goals affecting whole things, refusal to change or let go of our desires that harm others as a whole, i.e. a belief in authority. So that's an example of what our choices and actions affecting others. When we choose to be complacent, when we watch police officers dragging people out of their cars and bludgeoning them for no reason at all, and we do nothing about it, well, we're maintaining a belief in authority. We're being complacent in the face of violence, and that choice not to act has a universal or group impact, okay? Ignorance of the self and universal relationship. So just like in our picture, she's just oblivious. She doesn't even care whether or not her actions affect others. She's so focused on everything she's doing, she doesn't have any clue what's happening around her, either because her awareness is deadened or because she's has a willful disregard for what her actions are doing to others. Now, this is characterized by defense against truth. Like we said, people got to build these walls of ignorance to shield themselves from the truth. It's a constant refusal to self-reflect, so you don't even want to look at yourself or change one's methods or goals. This is ego worship. Basically what we're doing is we're putting ourselves on a pedestal and saying, you know, we're better than everybody else. I don't have time to look for a trash can to throw this can away in the proper place. I'm just going to throw it over my shoulder and, you know, somebody else will deal with it. And so here, what we have is an example of how our actions and choices literally affect whole groups and beings. Another great example of this is think about yourself in a restaurant. Now, our choice, what we do, because this is universal, everything that we choose to do, we focus our attention on what knowledge we have acquired versus what we haven't acquired, is going to create some agreement with a group or system in a universal capacity. So, in a more direct sense, if we're in a restaurant, and let's say we're just happily enjoying our meal, and all of a sudden we hear somebody choking, and they're choking on something, and they're like turning blue. And we realize that, you know, shoot, this person needs the Heimlich maneuver. But you don't know the Heimlich maneuver. You haven't actually educated yourself on the knowledge of how to perform the Heimlich maneuver. So what happens? This person, they end up choking and dying. So now you have an experience where you are made palpably aware of the fact that your ignorance, or I'll use a less strong word, your lack of knowledge in relation to how to give somebody the Heimlich maneuver has been made aware to you. And if you're choosing to be honorable with, if you're honoring these group contracts or agreements, you realize that now you have the potential, that because you're aware of these things, you recognize the moral obligation because you have moral awareness. Okay? You realize that learning the Heimlich maneuver and empowering yourself with that knowledge is an honorable action in relation to others. And you're empowering yourself with truth and knowledge, which is going to help the next person that you see who's going to be choking on, you know, their pea soup or whatever it is that they were choking on. So it's going to be an experience of empowerment for you. You see that you are morally culpable. You contributed to this person dying because you did not have the knowledge or experience to help them. And as a result, you're going to take this karma, quote unquote, and you're going to do something with it. You're going to empower yourself with knowledge. You're going to realize and self-reflect and realize that, shoot, you know, I could have done something. I could have helped this person. And now you're going to transform, discern that you don't have that knowledge, and empower yourself with knowledge. Well, conversely, if you're acting dishonorably, you may notice that this person's choking in front of you and say, well, you know, I don't know how to do Heimlich maneuver. Is there a doctor in the house? Is there a doctor in the house? Oh, there's no doctor. Oh, well, man, that's a shame. Isn't life crazy? Life can be so deterministic. This person just died. What a horrible tragedy. And you don't, again, what are the words you're using? Is there a doctor around? Why are you saying that? Because you are with that statement, you're revealing the fact that you don't even recognize yourself as a potential person to help the situation. You're ignorant of yourself. And now you're using these excuses to justify your own ignorance, justify your own lack of knowledge in this situation, to deflect moral culpability away from yourself onto the fact that a doctor wasn't there. Or maybe you say, well, you know, if he wasn't trying to choke down his food so fast, he wouldn't have hurt himself. Well, now it's the guy's fault because he choked to death. So the point is that if you're acting dishonorably in relation to groups or systems, you're looking for any reason you can to put yourself on a pedestal and deflect blame or deflect cause from yourself to somebody else, which of course is going to be an ignorance, and it's going to deform your knowledge over time. Okay, because you're going to be building these walls of ignorance. So just to real quick wrap up with this image, we've got kind of the two modes of honorable and dishonorable, don't we? On the left-hand side, or on the right-hand side, we have this girl who just could care less where this can lays, and if it poisons somebody or if somebody trips on it, well, it's not her problem. She's focused on what she's doing. And then we have this guy. He's aware, because of his knowledge and awareness, that he can do something. So what is he doing? He's reaching out to help and pick up the can. He wants to positively affect change with his environment. So we have two people who are operating at different modes. One is dishonoring their agreement or their contract with their environment, and one is choosing to honor their agreement with their contract and work effectively as a result. Okay, well, that wraps up our presentation on free will, honor, and contractual reality. Real quick, I just want to thank everybody who has contributed either PayPal donations to the blog. We could not do all of the work that we do without your continued support. Additionally, we also appreciate any time you take an interest on the advertisements that we have on our blog. If you click on them, that also supports us. And I also want to thank everybody who contributed for Julian's health condition that he went through, he's still going through as far as his blood clot in his leg. That is definitely improving, and we greatly appreciate all the energy that is contributed in that regard. If you want to communicate with us and ask questions, show suggestions, maybe some disagreements. I mean, again, I want to encourage anybody to share their opinion and have a real discussion about this. I'm not some unapproachable guru or implacable person that can't be asked questions of, so I implore you to ask me questions, and Julian and I. And you can send us an email at sits, S-I-T-S, at sits, S-I-T-S, S-H-O-W, sitshow, at gmail.com. The website, or the blog that we have, is at the bottom left of the slide, which is sitsshow.blogspot.com. And next week, God willing, if there's no problems with Blogtalk or anything like that, we'll be continuing our discussion at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Galactic U Radio with Sierra Nobilina for practical knowledge for the awakening. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you are empowered by this information as I am empowered to share it with you. Thanks. Take care.